Okay, good evening. Hold on.
I'm not practicing law right now, so.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If everyone could have their seat. So I'm called to order the meeting of the Peninsula Clean Energy Authority for Thursday, June 23. If we could have the roll call, please.
Hi, everybody. If you could please state your name after I read your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Dave Pine.
Carol Groom.
Town of Atherton. City of Belmont.
Charles Stone.
City of Brisbane.
Lori Liu.
City of Burlingame.
Alamaico.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City. City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay. Town of Hillsborough.
Lawrence May.
City of Menlo Park.
Catherine Carlton.
City of Millbrae.
Jen Schneider.
City of Pacifica.
John Keenan.
Town of Portola Valley.
Jeff Alfs.
City of Redwood City.
Ian Bay.
City of San Bruno.
Marty Medina.
City of San Carlos. City of San Mateo.
Rick Bonilla.
City of South San Francisco.
Rajiv Gupta.
And Town of Woodside.
Daniel Yost.
Great, thank you.
This is the portion of the meeting where we will take public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. We have a lot on the agenda, so people in the public are, of course, welcome to speak on those items. But is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on a non-agenda related item? Okay, seeing none, we can take a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items. The only consent item is the minutes.
So moved. Second.
So moved by Mr. Bain and seconded by Rick DeGoya. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? So hearing none, that passes unanimously. Okay. So, in thinking about this meeting, we've been at this effort now for about a year and a half, and we've passed various milestones along the way. And tonight is definitely another milestone. Tonight we are going to put in place our financing, put in place our power procurement arrangements, and set our rates. So in short order, we will go from a concept to a real enterprise. So this is a key meeting. So we've kind of warned everyone that we may need extra time tonight because we do want to take the time to really go through each of these agenda items so that everyone has a good feeling for them and know how they interrelate and have plenty of time for questions. Now, in our past meetings, we've tried to lay some foundation for this in that we had a discussion about rate setting at a prior meeting. We had a discussion about how the ESPs work at a prior meeting. A little discussion about the financing, not so much on that. So hopefully that foundation will make this easier because I just want to acknowledge that we're well aware, or I'm well aware, that you received an awful lot of material. And it's all very complex material. But hopefully you have the grounding that will help you get through it. And we'll have the benefit of our staff reports tonight and our staff presentations. So I think you'll be very pleased with the work of our staff, both our internal staff and our professional staff. I think as many of you know, in my prior career, I worked in tech. I was general counsel. I was involved in a lot of big transactions. And this was exactly like that, in that this is a big, complex set of arrangements that have been worked on very hard by people over the course of the last couple of months, but particularly it became very, very intense in these last 2 weeks. There's literally, going on 20 documents in here. They're all interrelated. They're all complicated. And people really had to go and the extra mile to get this done. So people were working on Father's Day, working in the evening. Really, it is a startup, and people performed in that fashion. So I do want to just take a second before we jump into things just to acknowledge the staff and our professional consultants that have done so much. So to begin with, we have one employee, the CEO, Jan Pepper, who has been earning her salary in the last couple of weeks. She jumped into the frying pan. Our county staff, first on the legal end, with David Silverman, who's here tonight, and Justin Mates. This has been a big legal enterprise, and we will have some outside counsel, but ultimately David and Justin have been just pivotal in getting this done. David's really good at worrying, and that's what you need. You need somebody to worry. Professional worrier, but a very critical component. Daniel Lee and Michael Boander have really shepherded the financing along in helping us find a good partner, and then working on all the details with Barclays and the related agreements to bring that to ground. So Daniel will be presenting today. And then we have our three stalwarts, Gordon, Kirsten, and Carolyn, who do whatever is needed to make it happen. In addition, we have two of the three partners from PEA, John DeLessie and Brian Goldstein. I don't think Kirby's here. And we're really fortunate to have really the best people in the industry to help us find energy and help us structure these arrangements with these energy service providers. And then we've had outside counsel too, Steve Hall, who you'll remember from last time, who does this for a living, as well as Eric Tashman from another firm who really worked on the financing documents. So my hat's really off to the team for just doing extraordinary efforts, and particularly these last 2 weeks. It took a lot to bring this together. So I think you'll be pleased with their work, and with that, I will turn it over to Jan Pepper.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the staff, too, that I've been working closely with over the last couple of weeks. They're truly dedicated. They've been working hundreds of hours to get all these agreements and documents together. So the reason you have so much to read is because they've been working really hard. And whoever said government employees don't work 24/7 hasn't met this crew. So I want to echo Dave's thanks to the whole staff, and Carolyn, David, Michael, Danielle, Kirsten, Gordon, Jim, and then all of our consultants that we've been working with. They're a great group of people. They're really smart. They work really hard, and we have a great result. So on to some general updates. The next board meeting will be 3 weeks from tonight on July 14th here, I believe. We're going to have an executive committee meeting on June 29th from 3:30 to 5. Not quite sure where that'll be. I think maybe in our offices in Redwood City. A couple of weeks ago on June 15th, Carolyn, Gordon, David, and I attended the CCA, IOU, and CPUC triannual meeting. And this is a meeting where the CCAs and the PUC and PG&E and also Southern California Edison are there to talk about kind of the partnering issues that we have as we work together with them. So it was a great opportunity for us to hear about the issues that the other operating CCAs are experiencing, and for us to get their lessons learned and figure out what we need to do on our end. And also we were able to meet many of our counterparties at these operating CCAs. They're all very cooperative. It's just a great group of people who all want to make everyone successful. So it's really wonderful. We've also had a lot of outreach and marketing activities in the last couple of weeks. There have been some tabling activities. Carolyn was at the Menlo Park Block Party. Kirsten, Gordon, Carolyn, and some of the other Office of Sustainability staff were at the San Mateo County Fair. And I'd like to thank all our volunteers who came out to help for that. There have also been a number of presentations. Carolyn was at the presented at the Town of Hillsborough Community Workshop, Kirsten at the Midcoast Community Council, Kirsten at the Senior Community Center in Daly City, as well as the Burlingame Hotel Sustainability Workshop and the North Fair Oaks Bike Rodeo. So thank you to Kirsten and Carolyn for making these presentations and spreading the word about PCE. There'll be more and more of this as we go on for the next couple months as we really start gearing up our outreach for our October launch. So tonight I'd like to just kind of lay out a roadmap of what we're discussing. There's a lot of complicated things we're going through, and I'm going to just give it kind of a 30,000-foot overview, and this will be followed by more detailed presentations on each of the agreements. So our objective is to get you educated and comfortable with what we've put together, and as we get into the detailed presentations, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. There have been a couple of changes to the Barclays agreement from the version that you received a couple days ago, and Danielle will be highlighting those when she goes through that report. So if we go to the next slide. Who does the slides? Okay. So the first agreement we're going to be looking at tonight, which is agenda item 4, it will be the Barclays loan agreement. And just in general, we're borrowing $12 million from Barclays. We have, the agreement is between Barclays and PCEA. That's a little typo there. The purpose is for us to purchase, the purpose of those, the dollars that we're getting from Barclays is for purchasing power and for our working capital needs, and the term of that agreement is 5 years. The next agreement is 2 agreements with the county. So the first one, and with the blue boxes, is the agreement for the advancement of funds, which is a $6 million agreement, and the purpose of that is to provide collateral for the $12 million term loan from Barclays. And that is, in order to borrow $12 million, we need to borrow another $6 million so that they are comfortable that this little startup entity will pay them back. We will. And the term of that loan is 2 years.
It wouldn't take the credit card.
Hmm?
It wouldn't take our credit card.
Yeah. Yeah, we said we're good for it. And so that's the agreement there will need to be signed between the county and Peninsula Clean Energy. The other agreement with the county in the green boxes is the loan of $2,680,800 and the reimbursement of $300,000 for a total of $2,980,800. That again is between the county and us, and it's for the startup monies that you've forwarded to this group for the last year or so to get us to the place that we are, and for some additional operational costs in this first year, and the term of that is 5 years. The next group of agreements are the ESP agreements, and we went through these at our last meeting. So basically what we are going to be signing over the next few days are 3 master power purchase and sale agreements with the top 3 ESPs that we've been negotiating with. And then next week, when we get the final pricing from the ESPs, we will select one. And but we'll still have this master agreement there with the other 2. So the one that we select, we will then sign the confirmation with, and as well as these 3 other agreements, which is the intercreditor and collateral agency agreement, the security agreement, and one of the trust accounts with Wilmington. And where do the funds go? So for Barclays, our plan is to draw $3 million in June and $9 million in December. $1 million of that first draw will be going to this trust account at Wilmington as security for the electric service provider. And then the other $2 million will be going into our operating account to keep us going for the next few months. And then we'll take the second draw of $9 million in December. The next group is for the county loan of $6 million. And again, this was so we could borrow the $12 million. So we need to provide, or we were going to provide 50% collateral. So because we're drawing $3 million from Barclays, we need half of that for the collateral. So we'll be drawing $1.5 million from the county loan and putting that into the second trust account at Wilmington for the benefit of Barclays. And then in December, we will draw the other $4.5 million to back up the $9 million from Barclays that we're borrowing in December. Everyone got that? I'm going to be tested. And then the last one is the $2.98 million. So $300,000 was appropriated to the Office of Sustainability in February 2015. The county has agreed to continue that loan to us interest-free. The next $800,000 came in October of 2015, and then another $1.880800 is coming to us now. So sorry for a couple typos there. And so the total is $2.98 million, and that's all going into the PCAA operating account.
So is that a typo?
That is a typo. The date should be June 2016. You'll be voting on that tonight. And the county will be voting on that on Tuesday. Okay, so that's kind of the 30,000-foot overview, and we'll get into all the details on this as we go through all the presentations.
Okay, thanks, Jan. So before we walk through each of the components that Jan has outlined, we have one initial matter we wanted to address, which is to delegate to the Chief Executive Officer certain authority to take positions on legislation. Did you want to speak to that, Jan? On the legislative delegation?
Okay. So what we're asking here is for limited delegation of authority to the Chief Executive Officer to take action to support or oppose legislation or other initiatives. So there are lots of things going on in the legislature related to energy, and occasionally bills might be introduced that are not in our favor. And so working with the other community choice energy agencies, we've already been asked to help with one bill and to write a letter. So what we're asking for here is that you delegate the authority for me to go ahead and take action on things that require a quick response because things are happening so quickly. And we'd make sure that we set up a policy here that the legislation is directly related to us, that there's a time constraint that requires quick action, and that it's in line with all of the cities, that it's not causing an issue with what the policies might be in any of your cities or the county, and that it's consistent with our overall mission. And then I would report out at the next board meeting any positions we had taken.
Any questions on that policy, Pradeep?
Just one question is that, Jan, is that you would be representing PCE in some existing group, or it will be like what you as an individual making the necessary connections and inputs as the need arises? Is there an established organized group as such, like yours, or like yourself, CEOs of the other CCAs?
Yeah, so it's basically working with the other CEOs, with Lean Energy as well. When in the last couple of weeks there was an assembly bill that had come forward that was going to add more costs to our customers. So it's just to, we would either send in our own letter in support of what all the other CCAs are doing, or maybe we would sign on to a joint letter.
Thank you.
Marty?
Could we receive as the board like a copy of what they're asking for, so that we're not caught by surprise by the next meeting that, hey, they signed for this and we're like, well, we didn't know about that. But if we got at least an advance copy when you get the request saying, hey, this is what we're considering, just so we have that information.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Yeah, again, we're trying to address the situation where it's between board meetings and if there's time, we'll come to the board.
There's generally a comment period for some legislation, right?
Yeah, well,
It's not just going to come out of nowhere, but if
Yeah.
it's not, I understand.
There's gotten amend. that-
yeah, it's amazing how it works up there.
Whatever we can get when it gets to your desk, I would like to get a copy of that just so we're aware of what's going on.
Yeah, we can send it out for information. For example, we got a request to send a letter because some bill was being heard in a committee like that morning. It's like, can you call your elected representatives or send a letter in quickly so that they know that
Okay.
we did not support that.
So I support this idea because I have seen gut and amend things that pop out of nowhere pretty quickly. But I would like to support the idea of copying us, because it also might be that we can get it on our agenda as a city in time, so that you can get a letter from the group and you can get a letter from individual cities supporting or opposing or what have you, so that we might be able to support as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Daniel?
I think it's a great idea as well, and I think if the CCA speak with one voice, that'll be good for all of us. So I think we've heard all the comments, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve this resolution delegating authority to our CEO. Second.
Okay, motion by Daniel Yost and second by Larry May. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? So hearing none, that's unanimously passed. Okay, so let's move into our first meaty transaction here for the evening, which is our banking arrangements. And Danielle Lee will walk us through that.
Good evening, President Pine, members of the board, Ms. Pepper, and Mr. Silberman. I'm pleased to be here this evening to be presenting to you item number 4, which is requesting that your board adopt a resolution authorizing the incurrence by PCEA of indebtedness in the form of a loan or loans in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $12 million from Barclays Bank PLC. The execution and delivery of a term loan and agreement and an account control agreement in connection therewith, the creation of an operating fund account, and certain other related actions. So I know that the item was large, but we wanted to have the title also really long. So first, let me start with the need. Why do we need to take a loan from Barclays? Or why the need for $12 million? And I think Jan touched on it already, but there are sort of 4 main uses of the funds that we project. First, the monies are required to establish the required reserve fund for the energy service providers that you select ultimately for the various phases. The second is for general working capital that you need before PCE enters into its revenue collection phase. The third is to smooth initial seasonal cash flows. So your rates will be varying over the course of a year, depending on the winter or the summer seasons, and having some additional funds in reserve will help you smooth those ups and downs. And then finally, we would be using these funds to fulfill the deposit requirements of the CPUC and the ISO. As Jan mentioned, there have been a few changes to the loan agreement since the item was distributed to you on Tuesday. Most notably, the maximum interest rate that can be charged to PCE, it's based on a formula, but part of the formula is a variable. So the maximum rate has been changed from 25 to 20%. And then secondly, we put in an applicable spread table to really lay out the options for the JPA moving forward. If you'd like to put in additional money into the collateral account, you can have a reduced interest rate. So right now we're at 50% collateral, and the applicable spread is 310 basis points, or 3.1%. If you increase your collateral incrementally, you can see the corresponding reduction in the interest rate. So that provision was always there, but the table was added to the loan document for clarity to make sure that you knew. Once funds are put in for collateral, you cannot withdraw them. So these will be future decisions that you make. We have set up the loan initially at 50%, but this will always be an option to you should you like to reduce your borrowing costs in the future. Now, just to walk you through a few of the most pertinent loan deals, the loan agreement itself is lengthy, and I don't want to mention every single item, but these are the things that I think would be, that I would want to highlight for you. The amount is up to $12 million. You do have the ability to draw down less, and then you wouldn't be, you could essentially notify Barclays that you didn't want the entirety of the $12 million, and then you wouldn't be charged interest on that remaining amount. They would release those funds for other business purposes. Currently, there are 2 withdrawals planned, one in June, next week, as soon as possible. The second would be in December, and these are based on the pro forma that our consultants put together about the needs, the financial needs of the organization over the course of implementation. The term of the loan is 5 years. There is no prepayment penalty after the first year, so if you find that your operational results are stronger than you anticipated, you can prepay back the loan. Principal payments are scheduled to begin in the beginning of 2019. And if you wanted to increase the amount of principal that you paid, it has to be in increments of $250,000. In terms of debt, this is really in regards to future debt. So Barclays has retained essentially right of approval for future debt that the JPA would like to incur. Obviously, because of the pledge and the collaterals agreement, it would affect their position on the loan, their loan. This exclusion of future debt without approval does not include power purchases because, you know, every month you could kind of construe the power purchases debt. So you don't need Barclays approval for that. And it also excludes loans from member agencies. So if a city or if the county wanted to give the JPA a loan, that would not be precluded by this agreement. We talked a little bit, sorry.
Can we ask questions as we go?
Of course.
Certainly.
So we could borrow money from the county and Barclays doesn't have to approve it?
Correct. Moving on to collateral. Oh, yes.
I'll ask a question. It pertains to the prepayment penalty, and I've been trying to search the document to find out but what is the amount of the penalty, and are we permitted to do something less than a specified amount?
Yeah, the term is very narrow, and you know, we're not actually going to be even drawing down the entirety of the loan in the beginning. So you'll have this first draw. You're actually going to wait 6 months to make sure that you need all of those funds, and then you'll have your second draw. 6 months later is the end of the prepayment period, the penalty period. So I think that the amount is based on a percentage, but I don't recall the amount off the top of my head. But there's a very small window in which you'd be subject to it, and hopefully after that first 6 months, you'd have enough data to know in December that, yes, this is indeed the amount that we would like to borrow. So the window of risk for you is very narrow.
But it's still there.
It is, yes.
But you've minimized it by
Yes.
limiting time.
Exactly, by the schedule of when we anticipate to draw the funds.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. In terms of the collateral, I think I mentioned that we set up the loan to require 50% collateral. So if the loan amount is up to $12 million, then the collateral requirement is up to $6 million. In addition, we've offered Barclays a first pledge on PCE's operating account. So that will be your account where all of your funds are once your obligations to the energy service provider have been fulfilled. The collateral can be released in one of 2 ways. If PCE is able to receive an investment grade rating by one of the major credit rating agencies, then Barclays would release the collateral. Alternatively, they have agreed to release it proportional to the amount to the amortization of the loan. So if you pay off 20% of the principal, then 20% of the collateral would also be released by Barclays.
Daniel, can you just speak a little bit about the process for getting the investment grade rating and when realistically we could begin to potentially seek that?
Certainly. This is new territory, I guess I would say. I don't think any of the other CCAs have yet secured credit ratings. Barclays' projection was that in approximately 1 year, PC would have enough operating kind of knowledge and experience to be able to start that process. And they helped us differentiate. So an investment grade rating can take a couple of forms. A public rating is though, you know, just like how your public agencies issue bonds, that's a very thorough and rigorous process, or it can, and specific to a given deal, or it can be a private rating of the organization itself, which is a more streamlined process. But because CCAs are relatively new, we don't really know how to predict what the credit rating agencies would actually require. So that, you know, I would say that in the coming months, it would be beneficial for PCE to establish relationships with the rating agencies to kind of explore that concept, but we don't have a lot of information yet because it hasn't yet been done. That's why we have the other backstop of the releasing the loan amounts proportionate to the amortization of the loan.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
Any interest we earn on the collateral, is that still bound by Berkeley, that it's going to be withdrawn?
No. Although, so we agreed to hold the collateral in cash, and in exchange, Barclays improved the interest rate that they would be giving on the entirety of the loan. So the $6 million will be held in cash, but the $12 million will have a better interest rate in exchange. Of course, the downside of cash is that it will earn very little interest. So I don't know if it would be worth your while to withdraw it, but you're only required to keep that $6 million. Right, we've guaranteed the county a interest rate that's equivalent to the pool, so PCE would be responsible for the delta between those two amounts. And then finally, the interest. Currently at 50% collateralization, the interest rate is 3.1% plus the 1-month LIBOR rate. It's a floating rate, and I wrote down what it stands for, but I'm sorry.
London Interbank Origin.
There you go. It's a fairly standard commercial rate that's referenced by many of the banks. In fact, many of the bank providers in our initial discussions structured their rate based on this. And I mentioned already that you have the ability to buy down that interest rate in the future should you choose to. So you have that table that really outlines by percentage collateralization what the corresponding interest rate would be.
And just for Mr. May, the information on the prepayment penalty is contained in section 2.03C.
I found it after
Great. So events of default.
Thank you.
I'll try not to spend too long on this. There are a few different things that can happen that would trigger default. Starting at the top, if PCE were not to meet its operating covenants, which I'll walk you through, if PCE failed to pay the loan or the interest or the principal amounts due, in the case of PCE insolvency. In the case of cross-default, and cross-default related to the PPA, or the power purchase agreements, there are different threshold amounts for those two different types of cross-default. So a standard cross-default excluding the PPA is a default of $100,000 or more. And then the PPA default is an event of $500,000 or more. And then finally, if PCE got a credit rating, Barclays released the collateral, and then PCE was subsequently downgraded in its credit to below investment grade rating, PCE would be required to repost the collateral, or that would be an event of default. And they don't give you a lot of time. It's 5 days or something like that. Okay, so there are two main operating covenants that I just mentioned. The first is days cash on hand. So it's essentially, with the amount of money you have in your account at a given point, how many days could you continue your operations without any more revenue coming in? It's reported quarterly to Barclays, and their formula is, it's based on the cash available divided by the average daily operating cost of the prior 12-month period. because the projection forward is less stable. It has a tiered approach, which I think is beneficial to the organization. So essentially, if you hit a threshold, the bank requires you to take corrective action. So they're giving you an opportunity to fix the problem. If you take the corrective action that's required and things continue to go downhill, you don't meet the minimum requirement that Barclays has established for days cash on hand, then you are in default. And this minimum requirement and the threshold requirement change over time based on the pro forma. So we know that the JPA is planning to experience ups and downs in its cash levels, and we built the operating covenants to match the flow of money to the organization so that it wasn't just a flat number over the 5 years of the loan. It really took into account the projections that you have now of when you have to make significant other payments, when you expect your rate, your revenue to be lower because of seasonality. So it's meant to really match what the projections are for the financial performance of the organization. The second,
Since we're on the covenant issue, material adverse change in effect is always a critical element to make sure we're in compliance with the covenants.
Yes.
Did we spend a lot of time talking about that in negotiations, or did we more or less accept how they defined it?
So material adverse change was actually a request from us so that we wouldn't have to report to the bank kind of any change, only the things that would have a significant impact on the entity's ability to repay the loan.
So are we comfortable with the language we have there? It's in the definitions.
I'm looking to David mostly because
Yeah, I'm looking to David.
he's your worrier.
It was negotiated.
So we're comfortable with it.
And the language was carefully reviewed by Norton Rose outside counsel, who has an enormous amount of experience. And
Okay.
advises that,
Great.
that it's fine.
Thanks.
It's better than any change, essentially. And then the second covenant is debt service coverage. So essentially, this is also reported quarterly, and this is calculated based on the revenue available over the last 12 months divided by the projected debt service in 2020. And the reason for 2020 was that was sort of the closest to the average debt service over the time of the term of the 5-year loan. We didn't want to calculate it based on the lowest year of debt service costs. The first years you're not paying principal, it's just interest, so obviously that number would be very low. And in the end, you have a balloon payment to make up for the balance that's due. So we tried to choose a year that was essentially an average over that 5-year term. I think that Barclays had sort of, I'm understating the complexity of their spreadsheets and their spreadsheet masters, but that's the essential kind of underlying goal there. It also has a tiered approach where you have a threshold. If you meet that threshold, then the JPA is required to take corrective action. And then if you continue to fall further in your debt service coverage and you go below the minimum requirement stated by Barclays, then you are officially in default. And again, just like the days cash on hand, the requirement changes over the term of the loan based on the projections. So we really tried to match what you're going to be asked to do to our best projections as to what you think your finances will look like. And then finally, we've also acquired a third-party legal opinion. It was completed by Norton Rose Fulbright. And essentially, they have helped us to confirm that PCE is duly authorized to execute this loan and that the loan is enforceable for Barclays. They have a whole opinion that has been written to accompany the loan documents. And with that, I will open it up to any further questions.
Gary.
Just to, I don't know, I'll ask it, whoever can answer. As the board, will we receive monthly updates once all this money starts coming in and out, or will we be receiving quarterly as a board? Do you have any idea of what that might look like, or how?
Well, certainly quarterly, because we have to report to them quarterly. But I think we'll be maintaining our financials all the time. So whatever you want. I mean, we can give you monthly updates of our financials. Although these calculations we only need to do on a quarterly basis, so that's our plan, because there is a lot of variation month to month and season to season. But that's really to be determined, I think.
Thank you.
Are there questions for Danielle? Thank you for that
Sure.
thorough presentation.
Okay.
Okay, then I think then we can take a motion to approve this.
Do you want to offer public comment? Or?
I don't think there's any cards, but I will just check if there's anyone in the audience who wants to speak to this item. I do have a speaker for later in the evening when we talk about rates, but I don't have anyone, I believe, interested in speaking on this item. Okay, so we can entertain a motion on this if.
Second.
Okay, so it's moved by Rick DeGoya. I'm not quite sure who seconded that. Ann Schneider. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the Barclays transaction?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? And that is unanimously approved. Thank you. Okay, our next two items will be the discussion and a review and request for approval of our two loans from the County of San Mateo. And Jan's going to walk us through these.
Okay. So the first one, can you all hear me okay? First one is to adopt a resolution authorizing the chair of the board to execute a loan agreement between PCEA and the County of San Mateo in the amount of $6 million to be repaid to the county by PCEA for the purposes of securing a bank loan to address certain working capital needs over a term of up to 2 years and at variable rates provided in the agreement. So if we can go to the next slide. So I talked about this briefly at the beginning. So basically this is to provide the collateral of 50% for the $12 million term loan that you just approved. And as I mentioned before, we'll plan to have two separate draws. We're expecting to borrow $3 million from Barclays next week, probably on Monday or Tuesday, as soon as we get the signatures. And then we would also have that $1.5 million there available for the collateral. And then in December, we'll follow up with the other $9 million from Barclays and $4.5 million from the county. And this will be deposited as cash in this trust account at Wilmington for the benefit of Barclays, as Danielle just described. So we will be paying interest to the county at the San Mateo County Pooled Investment Fund rate, which at this point is 0.9 something %. And we are to repay the principal and interest the earlier of 2 years after the date when the funds are drawn. So for the funds that we're drawing in June of 2016, we will need to repay that to the county by June of 2018. And the funds that we're drawing in December of 2016, we need to repay to the county in December of 2018. Or alternatively, 10 days after the collateral is released by Barclays, because we have an investment grade rating. So it's a pretty straightforward loan agreement with the county, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Pradeep?
I just wanted to make a comment that I had a very nice chat with Jan this afternoon about this topic, and one of the things that I clarified with her is that this particular loan term of 2 years assumes that by the time 2 years ends, PCE would have an investment grade, some kind of grading that would allow us to withdraw our collateral. And if it did not happen within 2 years, then we'll have to replace this loan with another loan as a collateral. So that's because the loan date is fixed, 2 years, but the approval of the Moody or somebody is not yet determined. So there's this element that this loan may have to be replaced after 2 years.
Well, actually, our pro forma statements show that we will have sufficient cash by that time. Yeah, so we don't expect to have to take out another loan for this. By June of 2018, we'll have at least $1.5 million to to replace that if we need to, and the same in December, we'll have $4.5 million. So we shouldn't have to take out another loan.
Okay, other questions? Rick?
Did I miss it? What's the interest rate on that?
It's the San Mateo County Pooled Investment Fund rate, which is less than 1% right now. So it's pretty low.
Life, basically, yeah.
Yes. So it's actually very, very nice of the county to loan the money to us at that extremely low rate. Thank you, county.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
It's a motion by Mr. Benian, and the second was by
Stone.
by Mr. Stone. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any objection or abstentions? So again, that is unanimously passed, and we can move to our second loan transaction with the county.
Okay, so the next loan is to adopt a resolution authorizing the chair to execute a loan and repayment agreement between PCEA and the county in the amount of $2,980,000. This should be $800 to be repaid to the county by PCEA for the purposes of addressing certain working capital needs over a term of 5 years and at variable rates provided in the agreement. So as I went through this before, this is the purpose of this loan is to actually set up the repayment terms. So the county has been appropriating money to Pacific Clean Energy, trusting that we would repay it. So this actually makes it formal that we now have a agreement with them to repay the funds. So back in February 2015, $300,000 was appropriated. In October of 2015, $800,000, and in February, $1.88 million was appropriated for a total of $2.98 million. And the repayment terms are that all principal and interest is due on July 1st, 2021. So we don't need to be making any payments until that time. And the interest rate for each of these, the $300,000 is being loaned to us at 0% interest. The $800,000 will be at the same low interest rate that we're getting for the $6 million, and the start of the calculation of interest for that $800,000 will be October 20th, 2015, and the start of the interest accumulation for the remainder of the funds will start on June 30th, 2016. So again, it's pretty straightforward, and I think it's a very generous loan from the county at this extraordinary rate. So happy to answer any questions you might have about this.
Lori.
So this is a 5-year loan. Can you talk about what's the reasoning for that term and whether you expect another loan to be necessary once that period is over?
Why 5 years? We asked for the longest we could get, and they said yes. Do we expect to need, we do not expect to need another loan at that time. At our next meeting, we'll be going over the budget and our pro formas, and we'll be I imagine at that time we'll show some of our future projections, and once we start, once we get to kind of mid-2018, we're pretty golden, so we'll look pretty good.
If I recall, of that 2.8, we've already spent about half of it, right?
Yes.
So, and then calculating the second 1.4, we came up with that number, if I recall, planning to basically bridge PCEA, I think until, is it the spring, or maybe even a little further than that, in terms of when we can start to handle our...
I think it's based on operations until March of 2017.
Yeah, okay.
But it's just really for the internal operations. It's not, certainly not for the
internal
power purchases.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And in a subsequent meeting, of course, Jen will come back with her staff plans, which where some of this money will be spent. Any other questions or comments?
I'll move adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Bain and seconded by
Mr. Pollard.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, then we have that as carried. And at this point, we have financed the enterprise. And now we have to talk about how we're going to get the money back. And that is a segue into number 7, which is the setting of our rates. So John and Gillespie from PEA will help us through this.
Yeah, go.
Building, and Jan will have comments as well.
All right, good evening. I am John DeLessie. I'm back. Thank you. Pleasure to be here and talk about rates. If you recall, a month ago, I was here and sort of did a rates overview, warned you that I'd be asking you to adopt rates today, and so I'm back. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask you to do that. But we'll go through and describe the rate proposal here. So this first slide, there's a little bit of a danger in starting with this first slide because this is really the entire story in a nutshell, but I'll do it anyway. So what we're proposing is that you adopt a similar set of rate schedules as is offered by PG&E, that you set these rates so that there's a net reduction in customers' generation costs of 5%. And that is after accounting for the various surcharges that will be applied to the customer's bill by PG&E, the PCIA, and another surcharge that applies. So that's kind of the core rate design proposal, and I'll get into some detail on these items in just a minute. And then in regards to the voluntary 100% renewable option, and I don't know if are the product names finalized. Is this Eco 100? Okay, so this would be the Eco 100 option. The proposal is to price that as a premium to the Eco 50 rate or the standard default rate, and the premium would be 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So the customer would pay the standard rate plus a cent per kilowatt hour for that Eco 100 rate. And then we're in a bit of a, I don't know, somewhat awkward timing situation here with regards to our rate setting and the phase 1 beginning towards the end of the year in October, because we know PG&E will be changing their rates and the PCIA on January 1st. So we're going to have to, as more information comes out as the year progresses, we're going to set hopefully rates initially today. There's a chance that we may need to recommend an adjustment to those rates when we get into or near 2017, just in case we may need to reduce rates a little bit to stay competitive. So that's just kind of a heads up.
John, just a quick question. We have some insight about what PG&E is going to do in January, or preliminary insight, and this pricing takes that into account.
Well, okay, so we do have some insight, and the way that the information comes out from PG&E about the rates in January 17 in this instance is there's an initial filing in June, which we have seen, and based on that initial filing, it appears if things don't change the rest of the year in the power markets and various other things, that we might see two rate impacts, both of which are essentially negative to us from a competitive perspective. One is a potential increase in the PCIA, and the other is a potential decrease in the PG&E generation rate. So rather than trying to anticipate those changes, what our recommendation is, is that we set rates based off of PG&E's current rates, and when we see what those 2017 rates will actually be later in the year, we'll look at maybe if it's appropriate to adjust PCE's rates. So we don't want to guess at what they might be in 2017. We want to just make sure that we set the rates initially based in reference to the currently effective rate, so we know what that is. And when we get more certainty about what the 2017 rate is, we may recommend a rate adjustment at that time.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're recommending that you adopt a similar set of rates as offered by PG&E. These are all the rates that we are recommending for adoption. And we've sort of grouped these different rate schedules based on customer type. So we've got residential, commercial, large commercial, industrial, agricultural, and pumping, and other. There's just a variety of rate schedules that are offered. There's 36 here, and the advantage really of this approach is that by matching PG&E's rate structure, no customers left out in effect, and so essentially all customers will be able to enjoy that same 5% reduction in generation costs. It is possible you could decide that you want to streamline the rate offerings and reduce some of the rate schedules that are offered by PCE. And the disadvantage with that approach is that you may have a situation where a customer is better off with PG&E than they would be taking service from PCE. Could increase opt-outs or just customer dissatisfaction generally. So that's why we're recommending to match the rate offerings. That way it really sets up ease of comparison. Customers can clearly know how they stand with PG&E relative to PCE, and everybody sort of gets that same benefit on a percentage basis.
Yeah,
if there's any questions about any of these, I mean, I have some notes in here about how these rates differ, but and I'm happy to answer those questions if you want to get into that level of detail. Let me take your question first.
John, two questions. One is, where is the net metering part? People who have solar and they are right now on the rate with PG&E, let's say E6 and net metering. So what would be corresponding?
Right. Okay.
I can respond to that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, we're going to be bringing back a report to the board the second meeting of July. But net metering's a little more complicated, and we've decided for now to hold off on having any of the net metered customers be in this first phase. Because if you're a net metered customer and you get rolled over into PCE at the wrong time, you could end up losing all of the credit that you've earned on your solar system. So we're going to be talking about that with you and explaining all the differences and getting into the details of that. I also want to point out that our first phase in October is for 20% of the residential load and all of the small and medium commercial. So really, the first two columns, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, are the ones that are going to be the ones that we're focusing on for this first phase. Large commercial industrial is going to be in phase 2. Right.
Yeah, that's correct. And then the municipal facilities are in phase 1, so they may we may bring in some of the rate schedules associated with those facilities that would be in the large, really in any of those categories. But yeah, primarily we're looking at the residential and the commercial.
Right, and anyone else who wants to be an early adopter.
Right.
And Jen, I think the plan is to talk about the NEM charges at the next meeting?
July 28th.
July 28th.
I think it's the July 28th meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
My second question was that part of the customer bill would be PG&E services, distribution services, whatever they charge us. So that would be based on their rate schedule, the one they are currently providing to the customers. Now, you mentioned that we might simplify our rates later on. So how would that work? In the same bill, there will be one PG&E rate structure for their distribution component, while the generation service would be based on our rate schedule. Is that what you're thinking about, or I'm missing something?
Right. So that issue is why we think it's wise to start match with the same structure, right? Because I think you want to avoid a situation, particularly if you think of a time of use rate. If PG&E has a particular on-peak period, let's say from 4 p.m. till 9 p.m., and for whatever reason we decided we wanted an on-peak period from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. First of all, that would be very confusing to customers because they're supposed to be responding to these price signals. When is the peak period, right? You're getting two different mixed messages there. Even more fundamental issue, though, with that, or problem with that, is that we're reliant on PG&E to provide the meter data. And for residential customers in particular, they're going to provide that usage data in accordance with their rate schedule. So if it's an E1, which is just a non-time of use, single cents per kilowatt hour energy charge, all we get from PG&E to bill the customer would be, let's say, the customer used 500 kilowatt hours during the billing period. If it's a ETOUA, which is a time of use period, what we would get from PG&E is the customer used 200 kilowatt hours during their, as defined by PG&E, on-peak period, and then 300 during the off-peak period. So we really, as a practical matter, could not establish different time of use periods from PG&E, at least for the residential customers, at least at present. It may be now that smart meters are essentially universally deployed, PG&E will transition to start providing us with the actual hourly usage data for all the customers, but that is not the case today. So we really are limited in terms of deviating from their rate structure. So I think the comment in the staff report about you may want to simplify things down the line, you may not. I mean, that's not necessarily our recommendation, but it's something to think about, because I think one of the challenges, I think, with utility rates are that they're quite complex, and it would be great if we could come up with a way to simplify things, but that's not our proposal. This looks like a fairly complex rate structure, and it is.
So John, there's something like 37 rate structures or more, right?
Yes.
And they must, I assume most customers are in a handful of them, and others are more obscure? Maybe.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, out of our roughly, there's roughly 300,000 potential customers in the jurisdiction. And the vast majority of those customers are on E1. That's the standard residential rate. And then all the other residential schedules are optional. So we've got various time of use options. We've got an electric vehicle rate. Relatively small numbers of customers are on those. I would say maybe 10,000 total on those residential time of use options, and the rest of the residential customers are just on the E1. The commercial, A1, A6, A10, most of the customers are going to be on the A1. That's a small commercial schedule, really that A1B, which is the time of use. And then your medium commercials are on the A10. The one that's a little, it's disproportionate in regards to the number of rate schedules versus the number of customers is really that agricultural and pumping classification. Here we have a whole lot of different rate options, and not that many customers, particularly in this area, right, that are on them. So that's an area where
it knocks out quite a
you
few.
wanted to simplify, you might, but this is really kind of more designed around the Central Valley, having particular time of use periods that work with a particular type of agricultural or pumping operation. But yeah, there's only a handful of schedules where the vast majority of your customers are going to be taking service under, and the rest of them, for the most part, are options that work for some customers. And the assumption is if they're on that optional schedule, it's probably beneficial. And so if we didn't offer it, they would be worse off than they are today.
Okay, I think Cameron, a couple questions. Cameron?
So I just wanted to ask about the 5% discount, because initially 5% seemed it's a nice round number, people understand it, you can say, hey, you're going to say 5%, but obviously you dig into it and it's 5% on the generation charges, and then everybody has different charges, so you come back and it doesn't really mean anything. And so I'm wondering, is there a specific reason we're doing that versus just trying to be, 2 pennies underneath PG&E and actually make a little bit more money, but simply be able to go out and say you're going to save money, and sort of connected to that question is, given the rates that we're setting, how much do we feel comfortable, and how much in our own marketing promotion material is cost savings going to be part of the message?
Right. Okay. So I think that's a really good question, and the 5% is a round number. I think the direction that we received, or at least interpreted, is that we want to just be a little bit below PG&E. This isn't about saving a bunch of money, because as you point out, it's pretty modest. So that 5% is somewhat arbitrary, to be honest with you. It could be 3%. It could be anything. that you choose. But we're comfortable from a financial perspective that, you know, the organization would generate sufficient cash flow, be financially healthy at that rate level. But there's nothing magic about it. It's just a number that seems reasonable.
And I can add to that. We are definitely saying that we have lower rates than PG&E in our materials, because that is important. It's very, very important when we first roll out that we have as few people opt out as possible. So if we're offering a better product at a lower rate, hopefully people would take it. So it's easier to keep our customers and try to get those people who opt out. We did look at you know, having that be more than 5%. Initially, I was interested in looking at 8%, but then once the PG&E projections came out for rates for next year, and that they're trying, you know, they're attempting to increase the PCIA and they're planning to decrease their rates, it seemed like it would be more prudent financially for us to just stay with the 5%, so we can claim that we're less, but you know, make sure that we're financially solvent. I mean, we will be financially solvent, but it gives us a little more room to have some flexibility in January if we need to ask for a rate decrease from you. So that's kind of the strategy that we're taking here.
Ann.
Medical rate, where, if your household is on a medical, where does it fit in the schedule?
Right. So that is the benefit to the medical rate is a greater baseline allowance, and that is reflected on the distribution side of the bill. So that's on the PG&E side of the bill and would not change at all. Same benefits would be provided, but because it's on the PG&E side of the bill, that's not something that needs to be accounted for in PCE's rates. Is that
so we
that
could
clear?
still go 100% and still have the medical allowance?
Yes. Yes, okay. Yes. So because the distribution or delivery rate, and that's really what PG&E will charge, and we're going to provide the generation service, right? That's tiered. So, you know, in the tiering, you know, the price is lowest for the baseline allowance, and for the medical customers, they get a larger baseline allowance. So more of their energy is priced at that lowest rate. But again, that's all on the delivery side, so that'll continue.
And the REACH donation, is that still going to stay the same? So a customer can still have a REACH donation?
Okay, that one I'm not familiar with. The
REACH is the donation that you opt in for to cover people who need help paying for their energy.
Okay.
I guess we subsidize other people on our bill. It's called REACH.
Okay. Yeah, that one I'm not familiar with, but you know, we'll look at that. My assumption is that would continue, and that would be run through PG&E, but we'll have to research that.
Thank you.
Lori.
So can you talk about you know, the effect of customers choosing one rate over another on our revenues? You know, we obviously as a policymaking board want to encourage people to choose that 100% renewable option, and if more people do that than projected, how does that affect our revenues?
So the revenues will be affected. The revenues would increase because of that premium, but the net revenue really wouldn't change because, and I'll get to that in a moment, the premium, that 1 cent per kilowatt hour, that's designed to cover the incremental cost of the additional renewable energy that needs to be supplied to the customer. So in effect, your costs go up by a penny, your revenue goes up by a penny per kilowatt hour, and so there's no net impact to the agency.
Okay, so does the agency then make the same amount of revenue regardless of the rate that's selected by the customer?
Well, for the Eco 100, that choice, the answer is yes, or pretty close to it. You know, if we go back to the rate list here, if a customer went from, you know, an E1 to an ETOU, that could change revenues depending on how that customer uses energy. But that just, I think that sort of just comes with the territory. You know, that's you know, customers will tend to gravitate towards the rate schedules that offer them the lowest price. Most of that, you know, most of those decisions have probably already been made because, you know, these options have been available to customers for a while. So I wouldn't expect, you know, large migrations among these rate schedules. So, you know, I don't think that there would be a material difference there. It's going to happen. Customers are changing rate schedules all the time, but it's not in such large numbers relative to the overall customer base that it's a real significant issue. Okay, so then getting back, I guess, to the 5% and the proposed rate design, and this I touched on really last month. You know, kind of the methodology would be to set the PCE rate so that it's 5% below PG&E after accounting for the fact that PG&E is going to layer on the power charge and difference adjustment, the PCIA, and the franchise fee surcharge. So those are the two surcharges that when a customer begins service with PCE will be new to the bill. So we want to make sure that we subtract those from the PCE rate in doing the rate design so that when they're added back, we're still 5% below. So that's kind of formulaically what it looks like. And then here's the math on the standard E1 residential rate. PG&E, the generation rate for E1 is currently about 9.684 cents per kilowatt hour. So the way that we had designed PCE's generation rate, which is 6.815 cents per kilowatt hour, is to simply take the PG&E rate times 0.95, you know, that gives that 5% discount, and then subtract off the applicable PCIA and the franchise fee surcharge. Yes?
John, we've talked a lot about the PCIA. Could you tell us a little bit more about the franchise fee surcharge, and does that change, and remind me what that's all about?
Yeah, and the first thing I notice about it is that it's pretty small. So,
yeah.
You know, want to point that out. But what that is for is, you know, PG&E pays all the cities and probably the county franchise payments. And so that becomes part of their rate structure. They need to collect those dollars from customers through their rates. When a customer takes generation service from PCE, without this surcharge, PG&E's franchise revenues would decline, and they wouldn't have enough money to pay out the cities. So this is added so that PG&E is made whole in regards to the total amount of dollars they have to pay out the cities, and that way, you know, those payments to the cities aren't impacted.
And they pay the cities for what? For like
franchise fees. So I guess it's just the opportunity to put their poles and lines and things in the city boundaries. Right? It's just a payment to the city.
And it's relatively stable. I mean, it's small, so it's not worth too much discussion, but it's relatively stable.
Yeah, it's been in that same 0.006 plus or minus, you know.
Okay.
Range for the last few years. It doesn't seem to move around. It's not based on power markets. PCIA is volatile because it really is a formula that looks at PG&E's generation costs relative to the market market index. And so that market index can go up, can go down. PG&E's costs can go up and go down. So that's really volatile. The PCIA is, I mean, the franchise fee surcharge is not that way at all. It's just sort of in aggregate, what does PG&E pay out to the cities, and that's per franchise agreement with each city, and so that's fairly stable.
Did you have a question, Rick?
All of us are familiar with that in our own cities. But does that mean that PCE will not be paying franchise fees?
So that's correct. PG&E continues to pay those fees to the cities. Yeah.
Second question. PG&E has announced that they have an intention to reduce their rates, right?
Correct.
Something like 2.6 or 3%, somewhere in that range. What is the intent with respect to the 5% and the PCIA fee? Would you be expecting that we would be adjusting our rates down? PG&E adjusts its rates down? And obviously, if we are adjusting our rates down when the PCI rate is increased at the beginning of the year, that's going to be a net reduction in what we retain, or what our customers pay to us.
Yes. So, yeah, we're anticipating that, so based on that June filing, you know, it may be necessary to reduce rates by 10% in order to stay below PG&E on a net basis, and that's a combination of lower PG&E generation rates and higher PCIA. So what we've been looking at in regards to the financial pro forma is, you know, we set these rates at the 5% below current. When we get to January, if things don't change, we would drop them again potentially by 10%, and we're still can operate at a at a surplus at those lower levels. The issue, though, is that there's that rate information from PG&E may change. That's kind of based on certain forecasts of power costs that were made in April. They will update those figures as the year progresses, and then they will make their final rate filing at the very end of the year, right? So we don't know if it's going to be, if those numbers are going to stick. Yeah.
But I think that the important information to the public would be if it's our intent to remain 5% below those costs, then if they drop their rates, we're going to be dropping ours. So we're going to keep ahead of them at this pace. That's our goal. Otherwise, it would make sense to implement the 10% rate now. Because we're assuming we're going to have to do it in January. So I'm comfortable doing this. I just want to be clear about what our messaging is. I think that's key to our customers and to the choice not to drop balance too.
Yeah, our intent is to be below PG&E, and so rather than starting way lower and now, not knowing where they're going to go in January, this at least gives us a little bit more revenue during this first 3-month period, and then we can adjust in January.
Yeah, that's right. And then, and also, I think that 5% number, I don't know that you necessarily want to say we're always going to be 5% below. I would prefer you say, we expect to be below. And, right now we're 5%. We expect we'd continue to be below if we have to reduce rates in 17, to do that. But I wouldn't set up a situation where you're constantly chasing the PG&E rate. That could just put you in a really you sort of lose control of your rate structure at that point if you do that.
And in fact, we are using the term lower rates. So we're not specifically saying what percentage, we're just saying we have lower rates.
Daniel.
I sometimes get the question, so how come we can be lower than PG&E? And I've got, my answer about, well, the cost of renewable power has gone down, which is probably a part of it. Do you have talking points for us on that?
I think it's just, for me, it just boils down to, the benefits of competition. We're accessing the wholesale market directly. We're negotiating pricing. I think, PG&E has,
legacy costs.
They operate under a different set of objectives, right? We're trying to, what I would say, maximize, or let's say, minimize GHG emissions associated with the portfolio, while also kind of minimizing ratepayer costs. That's very different than the way PG&E operates. They're trying to make a profit, for one. They're trying to minimize the regulatory risk. The last thing they want is the CPUC to second guess them and disallow expenses. So I think we just have a different set of incentives, and we have access to that wholesale market, and the numbers don't lie. I think when you we're able to buy power and put it together with the operating cost of the agency at a lower rate than what PG&E charges, even after covering the PCIA and the other charges.
So, John, in my 30-second response to that question, I often cite PG&E legacy costs. Don't they have a lot of older agreements and they have their own generating facilities that they have to pay for?
They do, and that's, the PCIA is supposed to essentially compensate for that.
Okay.
But I would also add, PG&E is a for-profit company.
Of course.
So they have shareholders that they're trying to provide a return to. And we are a government agency, and any earnings that we have, we put back into the organization. So that's really the key. And they have about no offense, but they have about 5 floors of attorneys there. We have a lot of attorneys that we're working with, but
we have David Silver.
We have David. He's worth all 5 floors of those PG&E attorneys.
It's 1/29th of a floor. I can say with specificity.
We also have about 10 floors of PR people, too. Commercials, radio, you name it. Every event, they're there.
Yeah. Okay. So just wanted to show you another example, not to bludgeon you with this information, but this is a different rate structure. This is a medium commercial structure. And same methodology, you know, in regards to that discounting and then offsetting the PCIA and the franchise fee surcharge. But here you can see how this particular rate schedule has time of use energy charges. So there's summer peak, part peak, off peak, all with a different rate. And then winter, there's 2 time of use periods, part peak and off peak. And then down below, there's a demand charge. And I talked about this last month, but this is, you know, applicable to the highest recorded demand of the customer during the billing period. So it's $1 per kilowatt charge. Here we're just discounting that by the 5%. We don't have to worry about PCIA because that's strictly an energy charge. So just wanted to show you another example so that it's clear in some of the more complex rate schedules how this is done. Similarly, this is a large commercial rate, very similar. So I won't go through the detail here. But again, time of use energy charges and demand charges. Okay, yeah.
I noticed that PCIA rate is different for each one of us.
Yes, good observation there. So it's going to be the highest for residential, right? So residential, it's 2.3 cents. And then as you get in terms of the larger commercial customers, it declines. So here for the A10, this medium commercial, it's 1.9 cents roughly. And for the large commercial, it's 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour roughly. So yeah, it varies by really rate class. And it's going to be the highest for residential. And then absolutely, the street light customers have a very, very low PCIA. So it's just kind of the way that PG&E designs that rate. Okay, so just one more observation here, and I think it's easiest to see here with this simple E1 rate is, you know, the PCE generation rate at 6.8 cents is well below the 9.684 cent generation rate of PG&E, right? I mean, I think that's pretty clear, and the reason for that is the discount plus the fact that we're discounting further to cover those surcharges. But just, you know, if this were kind of a head-to-head competition and we didn't have to pay the PCIA, customers really would be saving a lot of money here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now moving on to the ECO 100 rate design. As I mentioned, the proposed premium is $0.01 per kilowatt hour, and that would be regardless of rate schedule. So it would just be your standard rate schedule plus 1 cent per kilowatt hour for all energy used during the month. The way we came up with that surcharge is by looking at the fact that to supply this customer with 100% renewable energy, we need to buy an additional 50% relative to the ECO 50, right? So the default product's 50%. We need to buy another 50% to get that customer up to 100% renewable energy. So we looked at the incremental cost of that additional renewable energy, and a 1 cent per kilowatt hour premium, you know, it would cover that incremental cost, and that would we'd be able to buy bundled renewable energy. So this would be without the use of the unbundled RECs, which, you know, has been kind of a policy guideline that we've been adhering to, not to use those in the portfolio.
So John?
Yeah.
So that's another question, of course, we all commonly get is we tell people, yeah, and you can pay a little bit more for 100% green energy. And it doesn't make, people don't, if you tell them it's going to cost 0.01 more per kilowatt hour, you know, it doesn't mean anything to
Doesn't mean anything, you're right.
So, you know, I've been saying 2.5 to 4% more. And is that a good answer? And I and also, I guess mathematically, why should there be a range?
Oh, okay. Well, so why should there be a range? I mean, because if we're talking about percent of the bill, you know.
Oh, the bill.
So 1 penny, you know, some customers will pay an average rate of 6 cents, and some will pay an average rate of 10 cents, depending on, you know, how they use energy, et cetera, et cetera. So if it's 1 penny, it's going to be a different percentage. So this table, I think, hopefully answers that question, because I agree with you. Nobody really knows what a penny per kilowatt hour means. So here we're comparing for an average size residential customer, you know, what the generation cost would be with the two PCE products. So, you know, we've got the 50%, and this includes the PCIA, et cetera. That's why we're showing it at 9.2 cents per kilowatt hour. But the monthly cost for generation service from PCE for that ECO 50 would be $40.94 for a typical size residential customer. And for the Eco 100, it would be $45.39. Okay, so as now, if we compare it to PG&E, their default service is, well, at least as of last year, was 30% renewable. And under their current rates, the average monthly generation cost would be $43.09 for those customers. So we're a little bit below for the 50% and a little bit above for the 100%. You know, a couple bucks below in the one case and a couple bucks above in the other case per month. And then I've also included, you know, the Solar Choice program. So PG&E does now offer a higher renewable optional rate to its customers. We call it Solar Choice, and a customer can choose to have either a 50% renewable energy content or a 100% renewable energy content. So I've included those premiums as well on this chart, and those are actually pretty expensive programs, certainly relative to the proposed penny per kilowatt hour premium for the Eco 100. The equivalent PG&E rate there would be $59.02 per month as compared to the $45.39 for the Eco 100. So now how these translate into percent, you know, unfortunately that does vary by customer. It even varies by customer class. I know we've prepared some information that kind of breaks out what that premium would be, the 100% renewable premium would be for different types of customers. I don't have that in front of me, but you know, we could certainly make that available to help with the marketing. Yes?
Looking at this, it strikes me that we're potentially proposing to be way underpriced for that product. And this is just my hypothesis, is that the customer that wants to go to 100% green is relatively price insensitive. And the thing about electricity, the other observation is you can't do comparison shopping, right? You're only looking at what you paid last month. You can't really do a clear comparison shopping. So I just wonder why not have a bigger premium for the 100% renewable and use that money to potentially offset the cost for the 50% renewable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I think one thing to think about is, I believe at least one town has chosen to offer that as their default. So there may be some concern about, you know, pricing that higher if, you know, customers are defaulting into that. But, you know, that's just one thought. But I think your point is a good one. This was just basically passing through costs. If, you know, doesn't say you have to set the rate equal to cost. But I would say this would be the minimum that you'd want to charge. It would at least compensate you for the incremental cost of the renewable
Also,
power.
a couple of municipal accounts are going to go with the 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really up to you. You know, that's your decision tonight on what you want the rates to be.
Yeah,
So-
no, absolutely.
But it's interesting, you know, if you look at PG&E 100%, looking at the dollars per kilowatt hour rate, and I assume you calculated that. Is that the actual rate that they charge for the 100%?
Yes, that's what they're showing on their website. The premium is 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour or something like that, maybe 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour. It depends on rate classification, but for a residential customer, that's what it works out to be.
Yeah. So in that case, we're 30% below PG&E for 100% product, and even for the 50, you know, we're what, 10% lower than for our 100% product than for PG&E's 50% product.
And my guess is you're not going to get a lot of incremental opt-up because of that price savings, because people can't really comparison shop. And so I think it's a sort of a personal ethics or mindset of, or personal wealth of just saying, yeah, I'll go for the higher price. And whether, you know, it's a 10% premium, 20% premium, 5% premium, it's not going to matter at the end of the day to that customer, probably. That's my guess.
Yeah, well, it's up to you guys to decide what you want to do.
What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, a couple of things. One is I actually think I don't want to make that premium too large because I would like to encourage more people to do it. So I don't want to set that bar too much higher. There's always a concern in rate setting about cross-subsidization, where, you know, one rate class sort of subsidizes another rate class. I'm not saying we're going to eliminate it entirely. We're not actually subject to it, but I'd still like to sort of stick to the principle that we're charging people for what they're actually using. Those are my two main thoughts. I agree with you about the price sensitivity in general. I just don't know. I think that, to me, it just seems fair to charge people what the actual cost is. So.
I'm sorry, Ann?
We'll go 100% in my household, but I'd rather be able to tell people we use about 300 kilowatts a month, according to my last couple of years, so it'll be $3 more for that. I'd rather them say, oh, well, that's only that much, I'll do that too, rather than us making money on it. So I'd rather keep it the way it is. When you did the marketing study, did we test for that? Do we want to look like we're all, who can I pick on? We're not all Menlo Park. You know, some of us live in slightly poorer communities, so I don't want to look like we're taking advantage of people that way. But we'd still like everybody to go to 100%.
Yeah.
There's a couple comments. So, Ian.
So, customers will be able to see the difference between the 50% and 100%, right?
Yes.
So they'll be able to look at this and say there's only a $5 difference.
Sure.
If we went up to a $10 difference, I can tell you my constituents wouldn't opt up at the same rate they would if there's only a $5 difference. So I mean, I think the goal here is to get as many people to opt up as possible. So if we're just passing along rates, I support this as it is.
You have another hand, Rick?
Yeah, I'll defer to Lori first. She said her hand.
Oh, thanks.
Apologies.
Yeah, I agree. I think passing through the rates is the most equitable way to do it, and you want to incentivize not just the residential customers, but the municipal accounts. And if it's a huge gap, it's going to be a harder sell. And then the other unrelated comment or question I had was for customers who have electric vehicles, I saw you had the EV rates up there. Will there also, for that category and others, be the difference between the 50 and 100% within each category?
Yes, so that's available to every rate schedule. And it would just be, you know, pay, in that case, the EV rate plus a penny per kilowatt hour. That's what their bill would, how the bill would
and does the
be done.
EV rate apply to people who, like, for example, I charge my electric vehicle like literally in just a regular outlet in my garage. So it could be used for other things, not just for electric vehicles, but that's part of what we use that outlet for. So
I don't think that works.
Okay, it has to be a dedicated.
That's my understanding. So the PG&E has the applicability in their rules and their tariffs, and so that's really going to govern the assignment to rate schedule. We're just going to kind of map our rates to theirs. And I think in that particular, I'm not that familiar with, I don't have an EV, so I don't have firsthand experience, but I think you may need to separately meter it.
No. Actually, all you have to do is register, put in your automobile registration number into the PG&E website, and it has a special registration as an EV.
But is there a requirement that you use it only for EV, or it can be?
All the rate's doing is giving you an option to charge your car really cheaply in the middle of the night.
After 11
I mean, and so if you use the plug during the day for something else, you're still paying the top rate.
Yeah, and there is no separate meter required.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that clarification. So, so as long as you meet the applicability that's specified in the PG&E tariff, and you can take service on the EV rate, then you would automatically take service under PCE's EV rate. So we're just piggybacking on their administration of the tariff applicability.
Rick had a question.
Yeah, I actually don't agree with what Cameron said. I think that there will be people who will be sensitive to the dollar amounts. We are going to be charging, after we calculate in the PCIA rate, a ½ cent per kilowatt hour on the E1 less than PG&E for the 50% product, and a ½ cent more than PG&E on the 100% product. And I think that's very competitive. I do think that people are going to look at it, and if they see, and particularly it's going to have some depending on our marketing, but if we say it's a ½ cent more than PG&E if you go for the 100%, and it's a ½ cent less than PG&E if you go with the 50%, I think we're going to see more people go for that 100% rate than we expected. I do agree that it's a policy decision that we can make and choose to raise the 100% rate a little bit to enable us to further differentiate ourselves on the 50% rate from PG&E, which is the default rate that most people will take. But I personally think there's added value to have more people go for the 100% rate, because they are making a conscious decision to not only stick with PCE, but to go for an option that makes a statement, which is really at the heart of what we're all about. So I like the proposal. I think it's a good proposal. Maury brought up the issue of the EV rate, which I'm familiar with, and yeah, you're on the rate. Everything that goes, you buy, all the electricity you buy hits that rate. And it's divided into 3 time periods. Some of these time of use rates only have 2 time periods, and they're very, very complicated. And I've gone through every one of them because I have solar panels and an EV, and I've looked at them, and it's very complicated. We're not making it easier. We're just going along with the PG&E rate, which I support that decision. I just think we should be conscious that that's what we're choosing to do. At some point, maybe we will, you know, spend more time in looking at actually what makes sense for this county, rather than just adopt the PG&E structure. But we're a startup. We're in a transition right now. We need to establish ourselves. I think that's smart to do what's been proposed. The one change that I would recommend that we do is that on the EV rate, we enable people that have major electrical appliances to benefit from that rate. And there is quite a move to introduce electric heat pumps and other electric-based heating for both your home, the air, and for water. And if somebody meets a threshold where they demonstrate that they have a substantial appliance, and I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what that appliance should be, but the experts will tell us. And the EV is one of those appliances. It's just the one we drive. I think that we should enable that rate to apply to those people. I don't think right now that's anywhere near the number of people as those that have EVs, but hopefully as we grow and we're able to educate people about the value of that and the consequential reduction of greenhouse gases, we will get more people to do that, and I want to make it economically advantageous to them.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to address a question. I think Ann brought it up about the focus groups, and we actually did ask that during the 4 focus groups that we had, and it was 45% of results of all the people said they would pay a premium above PG&E rates for the 100% renewable. Just wanted to bring that up.
So just a kind of process point. John, are you through your, we probably let you get through your presentation because there's a couple issues we need to bring to ground.
Yeah, just a couple more slides. So we've pretty much already covered this issue. So the rates that are recommended for adoption would remain until you change them. There's a possibility we may recommend that you change them as we get closer to 2017. In all likelihood, that would be a downward adjustment. The pro forma projections, obviously this is a very high level summary of the pro forma projections, but based on the phase-in, all 3 phases rolling out per the implementation plan schedule, over the first 12 months of operation, these rates are projected to generate about $147 million in revenue as compared to expenditures of about $118.8 million, resulting in a surplus or a contribution to reserves of $28.2 million. So pretty healthy reserve. Again, that's at the recommended rates. If you lower them for 2017, those numbers are going to come down.
And what's the assumed opt-out rate?
15%. Yeah, 15%. And we're pretty. We think that's probably you probably do better than that.
About 100% of city council people in all of San Mateo County to vote for PCE.
Good point.
So I hope we're able to get a higher percentage than the 85% of our customers.
And then was one more, and then okay. So the last one is just the recommendations, so we can take more questions if you have them.
I had a comment on the question that Cameron brought out, and then you reacted to that, and Laurie pointed out.
What piece of collateral?
I've been involved with the industry, utility industry, for the last 30, 40 years. And one of the things that utilities do, and we talked about it, that their mission is different than our mission. Their mission is to serve certain stockholders for the investments they're taking, the risk they're taking. So they have to show certain profits, they have to show certain stability of their profits. In order to do that, they set their rates so that more vulnerable loads, like large industrial loads that could go away on their own, in order to retain them, they try to reduce their rates and load the rates for those people who can't move away, like small residential customers. They can't produce their own electricity or buy the wholesale market. So there's a lot of social adjustments, profit maintenance, motivation going on in the rates that PG&E has currently. My own feeling would be, in order to keep our PCE whole, and more from the point of view of what we are trying to do for our environment and our society and community, that our rate should reflect costs. The motivation is not to make profit or not to cover one risk by pushing some revenue somewhere else. We got to do that work in a different forum. So I would suggest that we stick to cost-based rate making. That's what we call it in rate making. And you're familiar with that, where we look at the total expenses, then we figure out how much additional we got to make. We add the two revenues together, and then we divide by the kilowatt hours, rather than trying to figure out whether we can make more money out of this segment in order to take less risk in the other category. So my 2 cents are that right now we are on a very high ground with respect to our motivation, why we are doing all these things right now. And I don't want to have someone come back and saying that we are soaking people who are actually going for 100%, who are very aware of the need for a clean environment and who are actually doing something for the society as a whole, that they should be paying more for the same service than someone else.
Okay.
I would not support it.
Yes, I think there's kind of 2 issues on the table, and that I would like to also have a couple of public speakers. So let's take Charles and Ian, and then I'd like to take the speakers, and then conclude this discussion on the rate for the 100%. And then I think our speakers, and we got to address Rick's question about other electric appliances. But why don't we hear from Charles and Ian now?
I think Cameron's probably right, and I think there's definitely the potential to make some money there. I'm comfortable going forward with what's recommended for now. I don't think we should lose sight of this and apply. Certainly, we would be open to the criticism that we were trying to stick to the people who were doing the right thing. However, those people are showing that they see the bigger picture. And if we can go back to them in the market and say, look, we're not just taking this money and sending Pradeep to Hawaii again, but the larger point is we do want to have some money available to, I don't know, incentivize solar, build EV charging stations, and that's not going to happen if we don't keep our eye on that ball. So while I'm okay going forward with this, I think Cameron's point is valid, and we shouldn't lose sight of it as we move forward in future years, and we should figure out a way maybe to go to those customers and say, hey, you're the folks who see the bigger picture, you're willing to pay a little more, here's what we have planned, would you pay even more if we can get going towards that goal?
Ian?
Well, I'm going to build on what I'd said earlier, the PG&E REACH model, which is a donation that they take to help lower income people have energy. Couldn't we have a donation field? So if I'm a true green and I know that PCE is going to invest in local renewables and I want to support that, I could donate to PCE as a separate line item. So they're making a choice. In our case, it's a monthly donation. So just something to think about. To go back on Rick's concept about trying to encourage lower energy consuming household items, because at my household we're working on end of life, planning for end of life at home, we have oxygen machines. There are other people that will have other kinds of medical devices. So I just don't want to lose track. Yes, you get the tiered rate. We never touch, well, very rarely do we go over baseline, usually more on heating than we do on electrical. And I monitor it all the time. But There are people that we want them to stay at home. We don't want them in convalescent hospitals. We don't want them in hospitals. So those medical devices pull a great deal of energy, and it's just something, I don't want to slow us down. So maybe this is something we think the next time around, but there should be an emergency or medical equipment rate in there. But I like what Cameron's saying. I would possibly even donate more, but I'd do it as a separate donation field.
All right, well, we'll give Cameron a chance to.
Just say for the record, maybe I didn't have like enough coffee today. I don't think it's a good suggestion. I was offering it as more of an observation and a question. I'm not putting it out there as a proposal. So, but I do think, you know, I appreciate what Charles was saying, and I responding to Ann, there were a couple people who were saying like, hey, we shouldn't make any money, and I think the strategy of PCE is to use money to invest to kind of continue to grow local generation. So I do think our overall, if there's opportunities to bring in revenue that exceeds expenditures and invest in the future, that's
Right.
good. But I think.
I'm glad you highlighted it. Go ahead, Ian.
I'd just like to offer my support for Ann's suggestion, and you know, maybe we come up with a 110% category where, you know, these are people who really want to invest in the future and give them that option at a later date.
Well,
Well, go ahead, Dennis.
I like the idea of a donate button. I don't see any more nonprofit.
We're gonna get a lot
I
of
don't
those,
see any
but-
downside to having a donate button. If anything, if it raises any money, it pays for itself.
We're not a nonprofit, right?
Well,
I don't know what
we're a
issue.
government entity, so.
Can we take donations?
That's a really good question. I am 99.9% sure that we can.
You're not worried?
I know that you can make tax deductible donations to government entities, and I believe that to be 100% certain, I need to do the research.
I'd like to take these two public speakers if we may.
Just before I sit down, I just want to say one thing on the EV, the applicability with the appliances. I don't have a problem with that idea if that's the policy you want to adopt. I think there's a practical impediment to that right now, and that is if that customer is not on the EV rate, according to PG&E, the usage information that we're going to get, let's say they would be on an E1 rate, we're not going to get time of use information from PG&E. So we wouldn't really have a way to bill that customer. I think that should change at some point because we should be able to eventually get hourly data or interval data, you know, from the smart meters, but that's not done right today. That's not the way it works today. So I just want to caution you, if you want to go in that direction, that you know you need to caveat that you know when that becomes feasible, and certainly I think the staff may be able to kind of lobby PG&E a bit to push them, but it's not the way I don't see how it could work today.
Okay, we're going to continue this discussion because I know our speakers want to comment on that issue. So you have Diane Bailey and James Tulea.
Good evening. My name is Diane Bailey. I'm director of Menlo Spark, an independent nonprofit group working to go climate neutral in Menlo Park. And I don't want to make this discussion even longer than it needs to be, but I just want to note that Menlo Spark and many other organizations are strongly supporting PCE. This letter was circulated. I hope you guys had a chance to read our minor recommendations on the rates. And I want to go back to a recommendation that we've made a couple of times over, maybe 17 or 20 times, that the 100% Renewable Club is open to anyone who wants to join. There's no cost to join. And a lot of the members, a lot of the cities that have adopted 100% renewable goals, it's just a goal. It's not a commitment that's going to happen overnight. It's something that those cities are going to work towards over time. And I really hope that this body can reconsider adopting 100% carbon-free or renewable, whatever you're comfortable with, as a goal, and do so in the near future. It's easy to kick that can down the road. It's really easy to get kind of complacent. Starting 75% carbon-free is a great place to start, and you guys should be, all of you, commended for that, but please don't lose sight of the carbon-free power goals. On the rate recommendations, it was great discussion here this evening, and I just want to offer a counter argument to please not offer too much of a discount. We recognize that the 5% discount to PG&E rates is a great way to minimize opt-outs, and that's super important, but we would like to see the clean part of the power emphasized over the discount part so that this isn't, doesn't become a cash cow of a program. Also want to really thank Councilmember Rick DeGolia for bringing up the EV rate modification to allow homeowners who electrify natural gas uses like home heating and water heating to access that rate. We provided very specific language in the letter to help do that, just very minor tweaks to the existing structure. And I want to thank you guys very much. This is a historic moment. You should all be commended, and I hope that you're celebrating it. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And James.
Hi, James Talea. I live in Sunnyvale. I'm also here representing the local 350.org, the national grassroots organization, the Silicon Valley chapter, which covers both San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. I also am on the leadership group at Sunnyvale Cool group, and recently joined the board of Carbon Free Mountain View to work through neighboring cities. So as I mentioned in an earlier meeting, 2/3 of natural gas use or greenhouse gases in the home come from natural gas use, and water heating is about half, and space heating is a little over 1/3. So it's a natural coming step for this organization, critical to its fundamental goals to reduce greenhouse gases. So making a simple change now, or as soon as it's feasible, I'm a little unclear about what John just said, but to the extent that it's feasible, immediately, it's a simple change just for the availability to allow a market signal to just start moving in the right direction, because right now you would be adopting, with the exception of the EV rate for only EV owners, a built-in bias and incentive for the use of natural gas for home heating and water heating. So that's contrary to your objectives of reducing greenhouse gases. You're actually going in the wrong direction if you do not make this more broadly available, because all the other rates in the residential schedule cost more. It costs more upfront to buy and install a heat pump technology for both of those, and the operating costs are higher because you cannot make up for it in the tiering of those other rates, and the EV rate does not have tiering, and in the gap between the off-peak versus the partial peak and off-peak, there's enough gap there in the EV rate to actually make it economically worthwhile. You won't get the market to start moving in the direction and start thinking about how to help customers save energy and save money and save greenhouse gases if you don't start moving in this direction. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, James.
Can I quickly respond to that?
Yeah, I think we do need to flush through this question.
Well, I actually completely agree with you on that. I think from what I see in rate setting proceedings, a lot of the rates are moving generally away from tiering. I think time of use is now being discussed as the default starting in 2019. So I completely agree with Rick and with James that we should be thinking about these things going forward, about how really this is the beginning of things that we can do to start innovating on our rate setting. But it's something that's going to take time and probably start with small pilots and things. But it's a very good point. Thank you.
Jan, do you have some thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is what John stated, is that we won't have the data in order to bill someone who doesn't have an EV on that rate. So until we are able to do that, we'll have to wait for that. But I agree that, you know, we do want to innovate. We do want to look at new rate structures and things like that. And when we have the data available from PG&E, which we should have soon. I mean, everyone's got a smart meter, and we ought to be able to get that data. That you know, it's a good goal for the future. We need to launch first, so let's launch and get everyone on board, and then we can do all these innovative things.
Other comments, Daniel?
Maybe, Jen, to get your perspective on something that has been brought up at a few meetings on Menlo Spark. Do you put having a generalized statement that our intention is to go to 100% renewable more greenhouse gas free in that same category is something, let's worry about that down the road after we launch? Or do you see that if, you know, we have that as at least a policy statement, that that's a positive thing even at launch?
I mean, I think that's up to you. That would be, you know, really the policy that the board wants to set. In the letter here says to be carbon-free and at no additional cost. I guess maybe they're meaning no additional cost to the customer. It will be an additional cost to us because carbon-free power is, at this point, is more expensive than dirty power or not carbon-free power. So, but, you know, to have a goal and maybe have that be, have some financial parameters along with that, yeah, we want to be carbon-free or 100% carbon-free as long as we can meet some financial objectives. I think, you know, we could certainly go for that.
Could I make, I mean, we've got a lot going on this evening. Could I make a request that that be something that's on a future agenda item?
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same. I mean, I do think that, you know, it's important for us to, you know, state, you know, expressly, you know, what our objectives are, and I do think we all share this goal of becoming 100% green, but how we word that and it's something I think we should dedicate some time to, but we should do that certainly this year. Hopefully, maybe we can get it done before we actually launch in October. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we're going to do in our next meeting, we're planning to have a presentation on what's renewable and what's greenhouse gas free, and to go, we're putting together a white paper on that because different state agencies regulate different things. Like the Air Resources Board looks at carbon content, the Energy Commission looks at renewable content. They're not necessarily aligned. And so I think, you know, there might be, it'll be an opportunity for the board to understand the differences between those and how the state agencies look at them, and then help us, inform us as to how we want to go forward.
So we will agendize that and start that discussion with that presentation for sure.
Thank you.
You know, I had one question for Jan, and maybe Sean Marshall can add too. You know, I think we'd like to see, we'd all like to see a lot of our ratepayers adopt 100% Eco 100 product. But it seems to be my recollection that a surprisingly small percentage of people do that. And I don't know if Jan or Sean have that data at their fingertips. And
I just looked it up.
Okay.
For Marine Clean Energy, for their October plan said that they had 1.9% opt up, and that they estimated over a 10-year period they could maybe get to 5%.
Opt up.
Opt up.
That's really surprising.
Yeah. Is that by number of companies or amount of energy usage?
That's number of customers. So
it's big customers.
It's 1.6% of residential customers and 0.3% of commercial customers.
Yeah, one thing that you know, yeah. I mean, I think that's, you know, I know one thing that the team will be thinking about is what is our goal. You know, I think we'll want to beat that, but obviously the numbers are, it's not intuitive. You know, if someone had asked me, I would have said 5 to 10%. You know.
So I think we launch as we are, and then later we have a marketing program to encourage opt-out.
Oh yeah, and minimize opt-out. But those specific goals are, I think the team has some sense for that, but we should, you know, we'll want to bring that back to the board for more discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how our results come out, because 45% of the people, this is in a focus group, and a focus group said that they would go 100%. You know, have 45% going to actually do that. It's easy to answer a survey, but when it actually comes time to write your check, what do people actually?
Yeah, isn't that interesting, the difference between the survey and the reality?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because you don't go and ask everyone.
Okay. Well, this has been a good discussion.
So we need a motion.
We need a motion to adopt. Well, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't have any other cards, but if someone has some final comments from the public, we can take that.
Well, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up as well.
Oh, thank you, Jan.
Hi, Michael Clausen. I'll be very brief. I used to be a resident of Palo Alto, and they set, I think, the national record for the percentage of people going. They had a Palo Alto Green program. It wasn't quite equivalent to this, but the same idea. It was about $3 or $4 a month higher, and they had something like 24% of the public sign up for that. I think if we can keep it just approximately the same as this recommendation, I can imagine the local environmental groups and the cities doing some really great marketing and shoot for 15 or 20%. And, let's not just get stuck with 1 or 2%. I think we can go a lot higher.
Yeah, we will have to, I'm sure Jan is probably somewhat familiar with what Palo Alto did, and we should learn from that. And Jan, you had some comments.
Yeah, I don't want to get us off base, but one other kind of rate-related thing is that I think when you were discussing your implementation plan, there's a, and the other CCEs have this, there's a $5 fee for customers who opt out after the enrollment period for residential customers. And on the commercial side, there's a $25 fee for customers who opt out after the initial enrollment window. So if it's 60 days after you were going to enroll and then you decide to opt out, the question is, do you want to go ahead and charge a $5 administrative fee for residential customers and a $25 fee for commercial customers? So maybe that's a separate vote, but I just wanted to make I think that had not really come to closure before, and we need to come to closure on that tonight as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you for raising that. And why don't we discuss that before we take a motion, because it is really part of our rates, I think.
Do we need to be consistent with what we put in the implementation plan on that particular?
Well, okay.
My understanding is the implementation plan gave you the flexibility, if I'm not mistaken.
It should basically say, unless changed by the board, and as part of your normal rate setting authority.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
It's hard for me to believe that we're going to make a tremendous amount of money by means of this fee, and I would like to see it waived.
Is there any actual cost to us of those switches? I mean, I would assume it's nominal. It's probably
there's some administrative cost to change the files and tell PG&E, take them off our lists, and all that.
Related question is, I assume most of the opt-outs occur during enrollment. How many opt-outs just occur outside of the enrollment phase, generally speaking? 20% of them, or?
Do you know, Matt? Do you know?
I guess we're trying
to. Do we have any data on that from other CCs?
Yes. So normally you see most of the opt-outs happening either before enrollment, so as a result of the first 2 pre-enrollment notices, or after the first bill comes. After that, it's just sort of a trickle. In fact, sometimes it goes the other way, and you have customers coming in. So it's small. I'd say small numbers after that 60-day post-enrollment period.
John.
Yeah, let me finish up, I guess. So what I was thinking was that if we can tell customers, it won't cost you anything to opt out, ever. Just don't worry about it. That would really be ideal, whether they take advantage of it or not.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever is a long time.
Well,
Dan?
I'm trying to think of something for my customer service at Hewlett-Packard days. I would not get rid of the fee. I would keep the 5 and the 25, because if you can do whenever, they will, and your customer service desk is going to get those phone calls with people going this way and that way and this way and that way. So, maybe if in a year that much it hasn't happened that much, look at the fee at that point. But I'd keep a fee in the beginning.
Could we leave it up to the discretion of Jan, depending upon what's going on?
Well, it's in our materials that we're sending out. We're sending out our first enrollment letter, and we have terms and conditions, and in that terms and conditions, there's a statement about this fee. So before we print next week.
Do you have a recommendation?
I think we have a couple more comments. When we hear from Rick and I think Marty.
I kind of agree with Ann. I think it's a minimal fee, really. And I do think that if you attach at least some monetary value to it, it kind of keeps people from being just arbitrary and you know, carefree with it. They have to think about it because it's going to cost them something. So I would leave it the way it is. It's minimal fee.
Marty?
I feel differently. I think just, there's no catches. Just come on, sign up. You're doing the right thing. You're saving money. It's better for the environment. And give us a shot. You're not going to pay anything if you opt out for the first year maybe or whatever, but there's a point. We don't want anybody just to get a little scared of, well, there's a catch. There's a catch here somehow or another. Oh, they're going to charge me $5. I don't know, what, 25, whatever it is. Let everybody come in, get their feet wet, enjoy the water, and go from there. Simplify.
Once you, Chris?
Oh, I was just conferring with David, but I believe that once people opt out of our program inside their initial enrollment window, they do have to stay with PG&E for a year. So I don't know if that changes your opinion about people flip-flopping back and forth, but there is that 1 year buffer where they do have to stay with PG&E.
Yes, they can't flip back and forth. You know, I guess, you know, my thinking about it was that I know when we went around the county talking about it, we really said you'd have the chance to opt out. And I mean, I think I'm inclined to have the, you know, we could provide for that PC would have that right, but maybe in the first year, you know, waive it. I mean, it's not going to be financially significant, I don't think. There's very few people are going to, from what I understand, the opt-out outside of the enrollment period is going to be quite, you know, it's not a high percentage. So it's, I couldn't see it as a material financially.
No.
But, you know, on the other hand, it's fair to charge people. But I just have some reluctance just because I think about the way I talked about it for the last 18 months.
My understanding is that Marin still has it in their implementation plan, and John may correct me if I'm wrong, but if we ever decided was like financially we needed to do it, I think we could. One of the reasons we need to make the decision right now is partly for our marketing and the IVR scripts for customer call center.
Sonoma Clean Power does it as well.
So when you say they do it, they actually charge it.
They do, and they will waive it upon request.
Oh, I see. What are some other thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. I think it could be interesting to waive it for the first year because it just feels more like PG&E to want to charge for every opportunity. And for this just sort of first year, like you said, you know, try it out. There's really no catches, and then later. And I was wondering if in the marketing materials, is it clear to people that if they opt out, that they have to wait a year?
Yes.
Okay. It's in our terms and conditions. I would make that really clear to people that they, you know, they have this chance to come in. They'll lose it for another year. I mean, if they come in and out.
Yeah, it's in the terms and conditions. The small print.
Right.
PG&E will.
Lori?
I'm inclined to keep it in and to waive it upon request like they do in Sonoma because there's an opt-out program. You know, all the customers are going to come into it unless they feel strongly they don't want to.
Right.
So you want to incentivize to keep them there, and this is one way. You know, if they know there's going to be a cost to leaving, I don't think that cost is going to prevent them from opting in, but it may help keep them from leaving.
Daniel?
I'd love it if we can make a sort of a database decision here, because I'm about to do one of these, you know, I think like we've all done. I know, so the only way to do a database is if in the marketing discussions and the outreach groups, anyone sort of asked a question about, would it affect whether you sign up, whether there's a fee, whether it's easy for you to get out?
Won't affect that.
either we asked the questions we didn't. But, you know, my instinct is, let's make it easy for people to be green. And so let's tell them that if you join, you can get out anytime in the first year, and it's not going to cost you a thing. And we've only committed to a year there. And my instinct is there'll be very few people that opt out after they sign up. And if we get a few marginal extra customers signing up because of that, to me, that's worth it. That's worth more than, you know, an aggregate $500 or $1,000 that we might have left on the table from people opting out. My 2 cents, because we don't have the data.
So I guess administratively, if the term said, you know, these charges won't apply during the first year of your enrollment.
Yeah, go ahead.
But does that become some kind of administrative nightmare to?
Yeah, can we do that?
Track that kind of thing?
I don't think so. I think we just, after a year, we start charging.
Yeah. I guess I'd make that proposal then.
What was the motion?
We're still voting the rates.
Yeah, we still
right?
voted the whole thing, but
just for this, can we do this one separately?
Yeah, maybe, I guess, just since it is, we've heard different opinions on it.
Are they
so.
separate?
Are we ready to move on the rates?
It's related to rates, whether
yeah.
they make it in a separate vote or not, it's fine.
Okay. Well, just for sake of clarity, let's just take care of this opt-out fee issue. So I'd move that on the opt-out fee not apply during the ratepayer's first year of service with PCE. So all in favor of that proposal?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any objections? All right, then we'll incorporate that into the bigger resolution, which would pass the rates that were discussed earlier in the evening.
I make a motion that we adopt the customer rates.
Second.
Okay, so that motion is made and made by Mr. Bonilla and seconded by Mr. Pollard. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections or abstentions? Very good. Then we have our rates. All right.
So I was expecting to talk to you about 10 when you were really, really tired. This is gone a lot faster than I expected, I guess, to my benefit. I don't have a formal presentation. The 5 PPA-related agreements were presented to you 2 weeks ago by Steve Hall, outside counsel who helped us draft them. And not a heck of a lot, actually, has changed that I can talk about over the last 2 weeks. In fact, very little has happened with the PPA agreements in the last week. As of Wednesday of last week, they were substantially done. The last week has been classic lawyer stuff where folks were arguing over little words that they had agreed to weeks before, but that weren't terribly significant. The prior week was spent on the financial terms, which I can't share with the board. But what, for competitive reasons, but what the board needs to know is what the goal is looking at what we wanted to provide them as far as assurances, as well as what they needed to provide us as assurances based on their financial condition, because each of the various ESPs are in a different financial place. And so we were requesting different things from them to ensure that they could deliver, and if they couldn't, that we would be compensated. So what has been presented to you is one version of the set of documents, and each version is slightly different, but from there's 15 different documents actually, but from a materiality standpoint, in light of the size of the purchase that we're making, the differences are not materially significant. So I'm asking that the board give the chief executive officer the authority to execute. And actually, I'll step back for a second. There were 2 primary recommendations that were made by the board at the last meeting. One was made by Rick, and it was echoed by others, which was to require the PPA, the ESPs, all to sign the EEI master agreement. And Ms. Pepper is a difficult negotiator. She was able to get them to agree fairly quickly. That actually required some changes to all. The EEI master agreements were not designed in a way to allow them to be executed by everybody, and so there were some small changes that needed to be made in order to allow that, and those were done. In addition, there was a request, I believe it was by Member Yost, to add a provision in the agreement that provided for a hold harmless for officers and directors. That was also added. It was added to the EEI master agreement at the very end. I think it's page 16. It's in there. It's very clear. So those were the requests. Those were both made. The agreements are good. I think there may be some discussion this evening about how the decision making is going to be made. The ultimate decision is vested with Jan, but ultimately, to the extent the board wants to put together some assistance for her, the board can certainly do that. The plan is to get pricing on Wednesday of next week and execute the confirmations on Wednesday as well. So, I mean, I'm certainly open to any questions the board may have. You know, ultimately, the agreements have not changed a whole lot from what you saw 2 weeks ago.
Why don't we take a second and talk about what happens on Wednesday?
Sure.
Either Jan or David.
Sure, or Brian. He's here. Might as well let him talk since he since he came all the way from Sacramento.
I'm Brian Goldstein with Pacific Energy Advisors. So Wednesday is the day to get final pricing, as mentioned, and the way that will work is that early in the morning, as most of these commodity markets are on East Coast time, about 9 a.m., they'll get final pricing from all the shortlisted entities, have a 2-hour window to make a decision. Once the decision's made, you would execute the confirmation agreement with that entity that you move forward with for business. So pretty straightforward. You know, the suppliers are very generous with the 2-hour window. They're holding a lot of price risk by promising a price for 2 hours. So we're very fortunate to have 2 hours to make a decision. So that's the plan for Wednesday.
Ann?
Do we have any idea what the energy mixes are?
Oh, yeah.
Did I miss something when I was reading through it, which I very well could?
Well, so, I mean, I'm not sure if this is going to be responsive, but the proposals were all to provide us the 75% and 50. So that's what the energy mixes are going to be. That's what they're pricing us at.
I guess I think I'm using the wrong term.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Where is it coming from?
Yeah. What kind of energy? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it this? Is it that?
Oh, Kirby's here now, too. Look at this. We've got the entire PEA team. Great timing.
All right.
You came all the way from Sacramento.
Look.
How many electrons? Kirby.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody. Kirby Dussel with Pacific Energy Advisors. In response to that question, I think what we've seen, you know, if we're kind of parsing this by the different types of energy that are going to be supplied as part of this particular agreement, you know, we're looking at kind of your conventional brown power being a relatively small portion, 25%, another 25% being carbon-free, which is going to be sourced from large hydroelectric generators that are regionally located, could be anywhere from the Pacific Northwest down into the state of California, though it's more likely those hydroelectric generators will be located in the Pacific Northwest. And then as far as the renewable component, that 50%, there you're looking at probably a pretty diverse mix. And we've seen supply sources that have kind of run the gamut in terms of the different renewable resources that are out there. We've seen small hydroelectric power. We've seen a whole bunch of wind. That's very common. We've seen less solar, even though prices have come down. Though I will say those resources are starting to work their way into these sorts of transactions slowly but surely. Certainly biogas is another type of resource that we've seen some of. But yeah, I think, you know, the small hydroelectricity, wind, and I think that will probably make up a pretty significant portion of what you see, as well as biogas. I think those are going to be some of the heavy hitters. There could be a little bit of solar depending on the supplier. Some of the ESPs, the energy service providers, the ESP acronym, they've definitely started doing some longer-term solar transactions, so they now have those resources in their portfolio. So we may see some of that too. But yeah, there'll probably be 4 or 5 different renewable generating technologies to go with the large hydroelectric and then conventional sources.
Just to clarify then, the brown, what do you consider brown?
Brown would be, you know, that's going to be market power, if you will. So purchases that may not be associated with particular generators. And the California Energy Commission has designated a term, unspecified power, which basically means power purchased from the market at large that isn't directly associated with a particular generator. Within the state of California, that's typically going to be natural gas. Generally speaking, that's the prevailing resource in terms of, you know, the percentages represented in the statewide resource mix. But you kind of get a little bit of everything, but you really can't differentiate between the electrons. So there's a line item on the power content label, and depending upon the supplier, you may have up to 25% of your resource mix in that unspecified category.
And I'm sorry, the biogas, how are you defining biogas?
Yeah, so that would be landfill gas to energy projects. It could be also gasification of biomass as well. So actually turning biomass into gas.
Not any of them really running right now, but I mean, if you want to show me a couple of them, we can talk offline. The governor is convening a group of people to talk about the 26 million trees that are dead in the Sierras, and with a big push to bring those to biomass facilities. Are we going to, and that's going to have to happen short term, or relatively short term. Are we going to see any reintroduction of those biomass plants that have closed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think those sort of policy changes will inevitably benefit the biomass
generators. Because it's all just happening this week and next week on those.
Yeah, yeah, and we definitely have seen kind of a bit of stagnation, you know, with biomass generators and their success and various solicitations that we've administered on behalf of various clients. The price has just simply been too high, and absent some, you know, a push on the policy side, you know, I think it's pretty unlikely that those will remain cost competitive. So we'll see what we get. But I think there may be some opportunity out there, and you could see some of those resources show up too.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's perfect. I'm now I'm seeing if maybe someone can ask a question. I can bring Sean Marshall up, or you know, who else is left. In any event, like I said, I didn't have a formal presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. Other than that, I mean, to the extent that you want to have a conversation about the decision-making process, you can certainly do that.
Right.
And if I can facilitate anything, please let me know.
So turning to Wednesday morning, and as you've heard, we'll receive the pricing at 9, then have to pick between the 3 quickly. But you know, what I'd recommend is a number of the members of the board had been involved in, you know, various parts of the work to date with the ESP selection and some of the financing, those being Jeff and John Keener and Carol Groom, Donna Colson, Rick DeGoya. You know, the extent that their schedules are open on Wednesday morning, I think it would be good to have them there to provide guidance to our CEO. So, you know, if there's anyone else who feels strongly they'd like to be there, let me know. Obviously, we can't have a quorum, but I think having some board members there would be helpful. Oh, excuse me. We will. I think that we'll be convening in the county center at the Office of Sustainability, and I believe PA is actually may be there in person.
Yeah, PA is going to be here.
All right.
Steve Hall will be on the phone. I'll be
Get the champagne out.
Right.
Power purchasing department.
Which is a lot of energy to buy in.
I support the group you recommended.
Okay. Well, that again. I'm sorry. Pradeep Gupta too.
So I have a follow-up question on the renewable energy content. So I didn't hear anything about local renewable energy. Are we looking at anything within California or more local than that? For the 100% off, or any of it?
Yeah, so the way that the renewable resources will be sourced, is kind of associated with definitions that are articulated under the California Renewable Portfolio Standard Program. So we could certainly get and expect to get a certain portion of California-based resources, but whether or not they're going to be local, that's probably unlikely. I think that's going to result from different types of programs that are administered by this organization, like the feed-in tariff and net energy metering for smaller scale renewables. But I wouldn't expect for a supplier under this sort of arrangement to come with a project that's truly local in San Mateo County. That would be unlikely. Yeah.
But the plan longer run is to try, is to encourage local generation. Jan may have a few words to share on that.
I think, because this is just our first procurement, it's, this term, it's up to 51 months with these suppliers. So we will have the opportunity to transition to, as we build our credit, and that will help to be able to have contracts with other types of resources that are local. So I think, we should just keep in mind that this is kind of a short-term purchase. It's for just a third of our ultimate load, and we'll be able to do more creative things as we continue to grow.
And as Jan kind of was getting at, because the timing of this is pretty critical, and it would be unlikely that there would be a new resource that would be contemporaneously available with the launch of your program. These are likely to be existing resources that have either surplus capacity or have a gap in the contracting terms or something like that. But as Jan pointed out as well, this is just a portion of a much larger load, and so there'll be many opportunities to go back out to the market, identify new in-state and more locally focused resources over time to build out that portfolio that will inevitably grow with time. So,
yeah.
The other thing I was going to add is that, the incredibly arcane negotiation process that David went through yields another benefit here, which is that we have a multi-party lockbox. So that when we find another resource comes up in next May, somebody says, I'll put 50 megawatts on a roof in San Mateo, we can actually plug them right into our existing agreements. So it's a really great benefit.
Right. And that's a good example of how we've trying to take the best practices from others. Lancaster's did that, and it's going to be a great tool for us to diversify.
And also by having the three agreements with the three
yes.
service providers, if in the unlikely situation that our supplier that we choose is not able to deliver, we can very easily and quickly move to another supplier. So we're all ready to go.
John?
Are there material differences between the suppliers other than what prices they give us on Wednesday?
So, sure. I mean, although in some ways the process is designed to try and minimize those differences. Like I mentioned, the three suppliers are different sizes as far as they're different sized corporations. I don't want to get into too much detail, but the nature of the negotiations are such that we're trying to make the agreements, make them as similarly situated as possible. But there are still some differences. So, for example, on one of the ESPs, just would not give us a credit term that was as good as the others. Just wouldn't. And there was another one who is actually going to give us prices based on two different credit terms. So yes, there are some differences, and yes, those may inform. There are going to be decisions other than just price, but we try to negotiate the agreements in a way that price is going to be a primary factor. Is that responsive?
Yep.
Good question. Okay, unless there's any further questions or comments, we can take a motion to approve these series of documents as specified in agenda item 8.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. May and the second Mr. Stone. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions, objections? Seeing none, that is passed unanimously. So we are on our way. Really appreciate everyone hanging in here tonight. It is a big milestone. Any board member, final board member comments?
I just want to reiterate what Dave said at the beginning of the meeting. I mean, I don't know what it's like to create this kind of organization. I've never done it before. I've been very involved in creating a number of startups. And I think, and this is a big project. And the staff has done a remarkable job, as has.
You're here.
Yeah, that I will say is high praise because Rick has been involved in the heart of Silicon Valley for his entire career. So that is high praise. Thank you, Rick. All right. Well, congratulations, everybody. We have a business. Okay.